Hello. Hello and welcome to what I'm calling Trauma 101. Now let's see. Write a comment. I'm going to write a comment. I'm going to say hello. Hello, please. Please type your name and where you're from. How about that? There. That should open it up and you all will be able to comment there. This is the very first time that I'm doing an on schedule Facebook Live. I've done a few others here and there, practicing the process. Hi, welcome. I'm just getting started. And I'm going to enter into the topic slowly because I want people that are just a few minutes late to be able to catch what we're talking about, what I'm going to share. My thought tonight is that I'm going to talk a little bit about what trauma is, talk about the experience of it and maybe the effects. And I would like to share a very recent trauma flashback maybe, or echo could be said, that I've walked through. Because I think that will be helpful because when other people share their experiences, it's helpful to me. Just use whoa, what's that noise? My computer's not happy. All right. Here we are. We're getting into it. And trauma. What is trauma? Well, trauma is when we're affected by circumstances outside ourselves, but they have an effect on us on the inside. And actually can be the examples that I've thought of are, for example, maybe we've had a home life when we were younger that was anything but peaceful, let's say that, and we carry that trauma. Or maybe school life was not exactly friendly. Bullying and stress and so on happened there. Or actually it could pick up broken relationships. That can be traumatic. It could even be as simple as, well, I don't like to use the word simple either, but an incident. It could be an incident or an episode that happens to us. And I like to think about it in terms of what some people think of or relate it to, the way some people relate it, is to PTSD, post-traumatic stress. And there's the word trauma in there. And people mostly connect that with people that have gone to war, have spent time in a war zone. But in case you didn't know, there's I shared this with a friend the other day that didn't know, but there's a new description that is CPTSD, meaning complex or continuing experiences in our lives. It doesn't have to be well, I would say it still feels like a war zone, but not where a war is declared and there are bombs going off and that sort of thing, but just regular life that hits us as if we're in a war. A pattern develops over a long period of time. That's another way to think about it. It could be an episode, but it could also be a pattern over a long period of time. The loss of a child, a horrific accident, episodes or seasons of traumatic experiences. And the comparison, or the initial description, maybe is a way to say that, the way it hits us is that let's use the example that's often used. You're walking in the woods and there's a grizzly bear right in front of you. It rears up on its back legs and is going to attack you. Now there's a traumatic experience. And the way it affects us is that it causes a separation in our minds between the amygdala, which is the emotional part of our brain, and the intellectual capacity of our brain. And the reason for that is because, never mind thinking, I need to get out of here. It's a survival reaction of the body that affects what we do. And that results in the quandary of possible responses of fight or flight or freeze. If you've ever been in a situation, I'll think of one from the past. I was in the principal's office at school, and I tended to be I'm a rule follower, so I kept myself out of trouble most of the time. But finding myself in the principal's office being challenged about something that had happened, I was tongue-tied. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. I was shaking in my boots in front of this authority figure. Now, I wanted to run out the door, but I didn't dare do that. Would I have liked to have argued with him and say, no, that's not what happened? Yes, but pretty much I just stood there and took what he said, put up with the punishment, and went home crying. There you have a traumatic experience that really affected me deeply. And that one is from my past. Now, the tricky part of a season of trauma is that what can happen is that we learn to live in that emotional side of our brains. The disconnect happens so frequently that we end up living by our emotions, driven by our emotions. Or it could be that in order to silence all of that stuff, we choose the intellectual side. We live there to dull the feelings that keep wanting to come up, to repress them, to ignore them. Denial is a common term that's used for this particular aspect of trauma. It doesn't work forever, by the way. Emotions can't be suppressed forever. And that's why every now and then, those of us that have experienced trauma, the emotions break out and we go haywire. And some people might actually, which is one of the effects, is that other people might start to think we're crazy, irrational, whatever, or we begin to think about ourselves that way. That's a good. Now, another piece of that is that, and this is when one of those phases of denial isn't working and the trauma starts to flood back over us, we start to feel as if we're walking around in a fog. Confusion, not the kind of thing where this just happened to me before we started. I walked downstairs and realized when I got there, I couldn't remember what I went down there to get. That was just a simple thing because I had several things I wanted to make sure I had in place, and this was weighing on me. I went down to get something, and I needed to pay attention to every minute in order to come on live at the right time. Not a big deal. But if you've ever had that experience where you feel as if you're walking through mud up to your knees, or jello, trying to swim in a pool filled with jello, that kind of feeling, that can be an aspect of trauma as well. Now, another part of the PTSD dynamic, or CPTSD, is that as we're going along in this process of, speaking from personal experience, in this process of living out of emotions or trying to live out of the intellect, as much as either one of those are coping skills, or we found some other way to try to cope. Alcohol, drugs, books, spending money, any kind of thing that takes over, activity that takes over, becomes a total and complete distraction. While we're making our way in life anyway, something might come up that will trigger, and that's a typical word for people facing trauma. Oh yes, I should mention this, just so we don't feel alone. There's a report, now I don't have my reference, where did I put that? That 2/3 of youth, that means boys and girls, young people, 2/3 have experienced trauma by the time they're 16 years old. Beginning that way, I'm sure you can imagine going forward all kinds of things that are causing that in our lives, experiences of trauma. Yeah, we've met the enemy, and it's all of us, I guess I could say. Anyway, getting back to triggers. A trigger is something that will remind us of that former damage that was done, the trauma that hit. And it can be a particular episode, like the military PTSD reaction, where there's a car backfire and the service man or woman could think that they're back on the battlefield, and everything will kick in from those days. The fear, the automatic reaction from their training, and so on. Now, it might look different to different people. This is where I'd like to share with you the experience that I want to use as an example of CPTSD. For an illustration. All right. Something happens and a friendship falls apart. One that you thought was pretty secure, pretty firm, something you'd worked at and communicated, articulated, and you felt the other person was doing the same. But it began to break down. Could have taken longer or shorter time period, it doesn't really matter. And all of a sudden, the relationship fell apart. Yes, the ones that happens, I guess I just thinking about saying all of a sudden they fall apart. Sometimes when we look back, as I have, there's clear evidence that actually things were getting thin. Communication was not there, or misunderstandings were happening a lot or whatever. And so, yeah, there were signals, but something happens and the relationship, the friendship evaporates. All right. Now I know that that's a trigger for me because it connects with the abandonment issues that I had when I was a kid. Yes, I was abandoned. Now, I wasn't put on a street corner, but I was abandoned. And so when there's not communication, there's not an understanding, and all of a sudden the person just isn't there, this is how I react. Now, you'll have your own combination of things that will be triggers for you. And it's the process of moving through those experiences that help us to learn about ourselves. So I'm learning the kinds of things that are triggers for me and how I feel, how I perceive too these things. For me, I get all jittery on the inside. I don't know which end is up. I do get that confusion thing. And the fog in severe ones, but those are sort of leveling out. And the way I used to describe it years ago before I realized what I was dealing with, I would just say to a friend, oh, I feel all jumbled up inside. And when that was happening to me, this is how I react to those kinds of situations. What did I do wrong? What happened? I have no idea what's going on. What did I do wrong? And I think that comes from my past, where surely this is a punishment for something I've done wrong, like standing in front of the principal and being told I have detention because of whatever it was. Yes, I was suffering because I did something wrong. Trigger hits, I'm suffering. I must have done something wrong. Well, then I go through a litany. I replay all these scenes, the words I've said, what I wish I had said, because nothing I say ever feels like it's right or complete, and playing those things all out in my head until I have to realize I don't really know. And then my conclusion, I must really be stupid if I can't figure this out. Whoa! Thankfully, those kinds of comments, well, the other one is, oh, I must be crazy. Those kind of comments are red flags for me now. And when that hits, I stop and I say, now, wait a minute. That's a lie. I know that's a lie. Well, for a long time, I did fuss with the one about I must be crazy, but I'm pretty much over that one now. And surely I know that I'm not stupid. Those kind of feelings, when they get ramped up, are pretty much an alert to stop. Now, you can check out what's going on in your life and figure out what it is that puts you in that place too. Then I start to consider the dynamic that went on instead. Say, okay, what were these circumstances and what was that situation? And pondering, how was I reacting? How was I feeling at that time? And so on. And that leads me right into other possible sources for the details, for my reactions, for my responses. In other words, it's not all my fault. It's not all my fault. There must be something else going on here. And then I consider, ooh, what's the possibility that this other person has issues themselves that are contributing to this broken relationship? Ooh, could it be? Yes, the dynamic. Yes, there's outside circumstances. We live in a fallen world. Misunderstandings just happen. But it's not always on me. It can be a combination. Maybe they have abandonment issues that are being played out, and they're reacting to something that I said when they're misunderstanding it. Or maybe, just maybe, I'm not the totally immature one. Maybe they're the totally immature one. Or maybe we both have a speck of immaturity in there. Anyway, eventually I get to the place where I have to realize that was in the past. If this relationship, these are the kinds of relationships where the other person isn't responding, so I kind of have to sort them out all on my own. But if it's a relationship that is something that you can redeem, that you want to address, that is important to you, and the other person is willing to participate as well, because relationships take two people. And if the other person isn't interested in engaging, that's like trying to fly a plane that has only one wing. It simply won't work. It simply won't work. And so, some of the things I've been alluding to, how to handle this. We need to know who we are. And through walking through and processing events like this, situations, learning, as I did, about my abandonment stuff, where that comes from, and a number of others. Maybe as I go through this series, some of those things will come up as well. But to know ourselves, to know how God built us, how God built me. For example, in this last round of broken relationship, I had to come to the conclusion that, well, let me back up a little bit. As I began to realize and be unhappy with myself, yes, thinking back, there were these signals, there were little signs that I felt uncomfortable about. What if I had addressed things back then, etc.? What if I only said this or did that? I don't know. Do you second guess yourself like that? And I had to realize, I felt bad because I thought, oh, if only I'd seen this sooner. Maybe it could have been saved. Maybe it would have taken a different direction. Maybe either one of us wouldn't had to have suffered as long as we did. And then I realized, you know what? God made me this way, that I move forward thinking the best about other people, that I trust people until it's really, really clear that I can't do that. And that is not going to change. Can I be alert, more alert? Yes. Can I spend more time looking to Holy Spirit to lead and guide me? Yes. Can I continue to learn more about myself and laying boundaries and so on? Yes. But I know now that I know, God built me as a sensitive, empathetic person. And I really like that because it allows me to serve Him in ways that if I was numb in those areas, it wouldn't work. And those of you that know me, I get really excited about stuff and I live that way. I don't want to alter it. I want to enjoy God's design for me. And so as I do that, the other thing that I notice is that I'm walking more in the purpose that God has laid out for me. And I just want to say that this tonight is a piece of that. I know that He built me this way, not only as a sensitive, empathetic person, but also as a person that's aware of these kinds of things, and that as I process, it's part of that processing is sharing with others so that they too can walk in that healing journey. Yeah. So this is part of that for me, and God's purpose being lived out right now, and I'm thrilled. The sweet spot, I guess we could say. All right. Anyway, we don't have a whole group of people here tonight, and that's fine. I know that this is only the first Trauma 101. And even as I've been sharing, other ideas have been coming up. For example, how do we get to know ourselves? And I've been working on it for a very long time. Maybe next week I'll share a little bit about that. Let me make a note, how to know ourselves, so I can remember that for next time. Know ourselves. Because as I shared tonight, knowing who we are and how we respond in certain situations can be very helpful. Oh yes. And then the following week, I'm going to talk about those reactions: fight, flight, and freeze. And there's another one that can really move us forward in the healing. All right. I'm going to close for now. I don't have any questions. That's what I was hoping. Oh, good. I've been talking for just about 30 minutes, and I plan to have plenty of time for questions and answers. That's not here now, but hopefully next week. I think when you watch this, the replay, that you can also put comments in there. But we'll see. That's part of the learning process, which is very scary, just so you know. Something I have not walked in very well in the past, and I did it. I'll end now. God bless.